All right, and welcome to the dumbest, shittiest, most black mold infested, most COVIDed, disgusting virus infested podcast that has ever existed since the dawn of the breath of humanity itself. I'm here with a very special guest, round two. This is the second time he's coming on the show. The author of Income Tax Shattering the Myths, Dave Champion. Hello, Dave.
Thank you very much. By the way, after that explanation of what your podcast is, I'm so honored to be here.
Yes, I know. Isn't it fantastic? We all have fun here, right?
Right
we all
on.
have fun here. It's your lowest point in your career, okay?
I've never been on the black mold of podcasts before.
Yeah, see?
So.
There you go. There you go. I did whenever I do emails, I always make fun of the audience. We always have the first sentence is always some kind of insult. And this last one was, hey there, you black mold infested sippy cup.
Oh, nice.
And so that's kind of where the black mold thing came from. But anyways, for my audience, so what we have today is I was carrying this book around, like I was saying before the show with Dave. You can see all the damage on the book, and I've got cigar ash burns and food stains. Not a whole lot. I'm not that crazy and goofy, but this thing was basically like, I carried it around. I do this with all books that I read. I typically, if I'm really into a book, I'll carry it around everywhere with me. I have a bag that I used to carry around the book everywhere I go, and this thing's been transported with me for probably close to at least 2 months. Because, well, what happened was I bought the damn thing forever ago. And I mean like probably 2 years ago. And it's been sitting literally right next to all my vitamins, which I get into every single day on the counter, just sitting upright like this, like, hello, read me. And I just didn't for whatever reason, right? And then finally, I finally said, all right, I'm going to read this thing. And that's when it started a couple of months ago. And then I got through it, and wow, this thing is, this thing is not, I wanted to ask you, we'll just start here too. I didn't even mention this before the show, but here we are. So do you find, because I'll tell you, I would not necessarily say this is like the easiest thing for somebody off the street to pick up. I feel like this is for somebody who's kind of already a little bit in the rabbit hole, at least a little bit. Like if they've already been well, this thing is kind of weird and taxation, and they've maybe seen a couple videos online and they know a little bit of a couple pieces. But man, if you're off the street, what are people reading this literally as their first thing off the street, and they're getting through it, and it's are they because it's a lot, man. It's a lot in a good way. I'm not saying it in a bad way. I'm just saying man, it's like the whole kitchen sink. You are getting the fucking kitchen sink, bro. Literally, right? I mean, this is like your accountant is, you can throw your accountant, you can, I always joke and I say, close the window and then throw somebody through it, right? You can close the window and throw your accountant through it, probably, I don't know, 100 pages in. I mean, literally, I'm not even, so what is your, in terms of difficulty and assimilation, what has been, especially since the book's, when was it published? 1996 or
no,
2012?
2010.
2010. So literacy's taken a fucking dive since then too. So just talk about that a little bit for me, will you?
Okay, so I think people at all different levels read it, but I will tell you this. People I talk to who are living it out as opposed to just wanting to know about it, the most common comment that I get from them is they've read it 3 times.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Now, and that's because what they tell me is that they want to know, they want to be able to recall everything that's relevant when they want to recall it. They don't want to have to try and think of something and then find sometime 6 weeks later to sit down and go through the book and find it again, right? So they read it 2, 3 times. I've had people tell me they've read it 5 times because they enjoy it.
Yeah.
Okay. So it depends on the temperament. You're right in that I think even people who are a little bit familiar with the subject still want to read it more than once
Yeah.
because you're right. It is information fired out of a fire hose. And
Well, from my experience, the first half, this is just my experience. The first half is very Title 26 tax code, and 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 then the second half, you sort of the second half it comes down a lot into all sorts of different things, and it becomes more. It's almost like the first half is like, here's everything I want to tell you, and then the second half is like, now let's talk about things. That was kind of like my experience, right?
I think that's a great way of characterizing it. I've often told people chapters 1 through 6 are the homework that allow you to make sense totally
Yeah.
of 7 through 14. Okay. So
I would say
you're right.
a roller coaster, on a roller coaster, you're like like here's the beginning. And then you're up here for a while, and then about halfway through the book it comes, because I found the first half of the book to just be like, wow, like you're working, you're getting some work done, you're sweating. It's like a textbook. And then the second half is like, okay, you made it, congratulations, now let's have fun and let's relax and let's have a cigar and talk about it, right?
Yeah.
So for people who are, and the reason why I like to talk about these things because you might be on a page 150 and you're like, God damn, this thing is really kicking my ass. And I just want people to know that just keep going, because when you get about halfway, it starts to loosen up on that a lot, right? But it kicks your ass because it's kicking your ass. I mean, I don't know really what else to say about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that was unavoidable because, as I just said, to make sense of chapters 7 through 14, you have to have gone through chapters 1 through 6, or you don't get what's being said. The other thing is the reason it's so thorough, especially that as you said, the first half. The reason it's so thorough is, of course, we know what the societal narrative is. Yes, on income tax. Okay.
Yeah.
So I felt compelled. You mentioned earlier the phrase "the kitchen sink." Everything's in there plus the kitchen sink. I felt compelled to not just present what I think is rational and reasonable, but I felt compelled to pile on more and more and more and more and more and more evidence and law and facts, because we're combating. I hope nobody's offended when I say this. We're combating brainwashing.
Yeah.
So when somebody's brainwashed, the brainwashing done right, the victim doesn't know they're brainwashed.
Yeah.
Right. So we're combating something that they don't understand they're brainwashed.
Yeah.
And then we have to somehow, without telling them you've been brainwashed, we have to get them to back away from all that brainwashing. Right.
Yeah.
That's why there's more information and more information, because I want somebody to get to the point, chapters 5, 6, 7, and say, this is irrefutable. Whatever I thought for the last 30 years is wrong.
Yeah.
But if you're overcoming brainwashing, you've got to really pile on the facts.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I want to say one thing real quick while we're here on the show. I'm going to do a screen share. Every single person, actually, hold on one second. I have to turn off upsetting. Otherwise, it gets to be overcompensated here for the brightness. There we go. Let me get back into the show here. Okay. And then we'll do a screen share. So it's the same thing with every single person when it comes to this book. If you go on Amazon and you look up the book, it's like $250, something like that. And then I get, a message. Everybody messages me. Oh my Lord, that's an expensive book. Don't go on Amazon. We can talk about maybe why you have it priced that way if you want to for just a moment, but don't go on Amazon. Go to drreality.news. Go to store. And then you're going to go down and you're going to see he has a 4-pack here for $118. He has a 3-pack for $107. I bought your book, Body Science, by the way. It'll probably sit on my counter for a while, just like the other one did, until I finally read it. But, I will read it eventually. I promise you that. But if we go all the way down, here we go. We have Income Tax, Shattering the Myths, $66. And then I believe it's like a few dollars for shipping, something like that. And here's the book right here. You just go to add to cart. And takes just a moment. And then here we go. And then domestic shipping is $9. Total $75. Proceed to checkout. And there you go. So just out of curiosity, why is it that the Amazon version is $250 or $200? Is that just because you don't like Amazon? I kind of got that vibe. I was like, Dave just doesn't like Amazon. He doesn't just fuck Amazon, basically.
I don't sell on Amazon.
Oh, what
That's
the
not
hell?
me.
You're kidding.
No, what people are doing is they're buying the book for $66 on my website, and then they're putting it on Amazon for $250 to make money.
You're kidding.
I'm not kidding. I wish I was.
That's
And by the way, there's some. I mean, I remember somebody sent me a screenshot. I don't know if it was Amazon, but the book was literally priced $1,001. So I don't get it. But yes, thank you for showing the website. That's the place to go get it. Yeah.
that's crazy. Do
Yes.
you take legal action, or I mean, I guess that's fine. They're buying your book and reselling it. Nothing wrong with. I mean, I guess
I
legally
don't care.
nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
you know,
fucking A.
I think it puts a sour taste in some people's mouth because I've seen this on social media. You know, I'm not buying this fucking book. It's $250.
I got an avalanche of those messages, and I
Yeah.
was like, "What the fuck, dude?" Like, I didn't know what was going on. Right? Have you ever thought about selling your book on Amazon at like $80 just to gap that out, just to cut that gap out?
The only reason I don't sell on Amazon is Amazon has very strict policies about what I have to do as an Amazon seller. So, for instance, to be an Amazon seller, you must ship within 48 hours. If you don't ship within 48 hours, you're in violation. They can shut down your account, blah, 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 blah. Well, what if Jen and I want to go away for 2 days so it doesn't get shipped for 72 hours, right? So I'm not into being placed in Amazon's straitjacket. You know, and the funny thing is, just internally, having nothing to do with Amazon, I sort of have an internal Dave Champion policy that I ship books within 48 hours. But if for some reason it's going to be 3 days, or maybe in a very, very, very rare occasion, 4 days, I have that latitude without some major billion-dollar corporation punishing me.
Just as a side tip, I mean, I wasn't expecting to get into this on the show at all. I have a couple books that are before all this legal stuff. If you have a PDF file of the pages of the book and you have a JPEG file of the cover, you can actually upload those, and you can actually upload those into Amazon, and then they print your book, ship it for you, and do all the customer service, and they take like 25, 30% fees, but you price your own book however you want. So if you wanted $66, you would price the book at like 80, and then they print it, they ship it, and they do all the customer service for you. I've had my book selling on Amazon for the first book's been selling since 2019, so about 6 years. The second book's been selling since 2020. I've never taken one email. I've never taken one phone call. I've never packaged a single book. I've never housed a single book. I've never even clicked a single fucking button in 6 years selling my books on Amazon.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I'll be looking into that. The fact that they do everything
Yeah.
would be well worth it for me.
And they have and if you do the ebook, so you can sell, so you can do the same thing. You can upload the PDF of the book itself, upload the JPEG of the cover, and then click one button, and it'll automatically separate the book into two categories: ebook and physical book.
Yeah.
And they'll sell both for you. And then basically the way it works is every month they tell you how many you sold, and they have like a graph, and you can get into your little dashboard. And then you have to wait like another month for the actual payment to hit your account. That's the only bad part. The bad part is it's like a 28-day
Cycle.
net layover. But I'm telling you, you literally plug it in once, set it up, write the description, and then walk away, and you will never. I swear to God, I haven't even spent 60 seconds in administration in like 5 years on those books.
So can I tell you a funny Amazon story?
Yes, please.
Okay, so a friend is an Amazon seller, and he says, Dave, what do I do about this whole taxpayer identification number thing? They want a taxpayer identification number in order to sell my products on the platform. and they want you to essentially sign a W-9, right? So um, I said, okay, let me write a letter that details that what they're doing is not in compliance with tax law. And then after a brief one-page description of the problem, then you can send that letter into Amazon along with the business guide to W-9, 1099, and U.S. person, the green handbook, right? That's in that 4-pack you showed a minute ago. So he sent the letter off with the handbook to Amazon. He got an email response like 2 weeks later, and it said, we've reviewed what you sent, and we've determined that we have to do blah 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 blah, right? And then they said, however, if you want to go into, I don't know, what your seller's dashboard, I guess, and you want to do away with the W-9, you can do that, but then we're going to shut your account down. Okay. And then now that's not the funny part is whoever was drafting this letter at the end, like the final sentence was, and we don't appreciate people sending us things that are inaccurate about tax law. It's like, well, okay, so you were sent the statutes, the regs, and the Treasury decisions, right? Portions thereof, right? And it's like, so if you consider the statutes, the regs, and the Treasury decisions to be non-factual, then what are you working from when you say somebody has to provide you with these forms? Because the law says you don't. A particular kind of person doesn't, but guys like you and I don't have to, right? So I thought it was really funny that when they were presented with the law, some clerk someplace decided to write in there, we don't appreciate an inaccurate recitation of law. It's like, no, what you don't appreciate is being shown the actual law you've never fucking looked at. That's what you don't appreciate.
I think it's so funny you say this because one of the things I enjoyed so much about your book, I laughed very, very hard, is Dave's going along and he's teaching you all this stuff, blah blah blah, do, and then like almost in like lawyer fashion, he starts just going off. He starts going off about like the government, or he starts going off about like the employment. The HR lady, and you name her like Gladys or something in the book. Like, okay, let's take Gladys, and it's like talking about the. And I just thought that was, but it's like you're such a gentleman. It's like it makes me think of like a country club, and there's a couple of guys and they get together and they start. And they just really don't like each other, and they're like saying some shit about each other. But it's like it's the country club, you know what I mean? That's almost like kind of how it goes down. It's so fucking funny. I love it so much. So, what was I going to say? So we went over the Amazon thing. We went over this. I say we just jump into individual. Sound good?
Yeah, sure.
So I wanted to show you. I think you mentioned it in your book. I'm pretty sure you mentioned it in your book, but let's see. I'm sure you're familiar with this, but maybe it's been a while. 26 CFR 7701.301-11. Have you seen this one in a while? Has it been a while, or have you just not seen this one maybe?
Yeah.
So the term Social Security number means the taxpayer identifying number of an individual or estate, right? So I took that and I found this. Oh no, I found this because of you. This is exactly how I found this, because I remember posting about it. I was like, oh my God, this is huge. This is so epic. I got this from your book. Sorry, I apologize. I got this definitely 100% from your book. So I took this and I went over to the SS4 form, right? And I was looking at down below here, right? And type of entity, right? So we've got estate over here, and it says SSN of decedent, right? And then we have sole proprietor SSN, right? And then I started thinking in my head, because I kind of already came to the conclusion that the word individual means sole proprietorship back in December. I kind of had some research breakthroughs myself with my own stuff, right? But then I've been trying to figure out ever since then, how do I really prove it, like in a really, really clear, easy way? Because I go on a lot of shows and stuff like that, right? So it states here, where's individual? There's no individual, but then we have sole proprietor, and it says SSN right on it. So I started thinking to myself, this is it. If I link 26 CFR 301.7701-11 with the SS4, I can take this into a courtroom and I can prove that the word individual, the definition of the word individual is a sole proprietorship. Am I crazy?
No, but of course that's contextual. That pertains to a business setting. Okay, a sole proprietorship is a descriptor of a kind of business operation.
Well,
So
yeah,
if
but as I started to go down this rabbit hole, I went down it more and more and more. Like, for example, the IRS website, right? A sole proprietor is somebody who owns an unincorporated business by themselves, right? Which basically the way they look at it is the owner of the sole proprietorship and the sole proprietorship are basically treated as though they're the same person, right? But
well, it's a sole proprietor means there is a proprietor, and proprietor means owner, get the guy in charge. That's the meaning of proprietor.
yeah, but it's like, if that's the case, then the social security number isn't really even yours. It's the sole proprietorships, and then that's a business, and then they basically just kind of equate you to that business. But I'm not a business. Do you see my point?
Right, but the application for a social security number is Form SS5, not SS4.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, it says here in the social security number means the taxpayer identification number of an individual or state.
Okay, but that doesn't have to do with Social Security per se. That definition is a definition unless otherwise set aside within a particular section or paragraph or something. That is a definition that is applicable throughout the tax code.
Yeah, yeah, I understand that. I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of shocked by this because I think it applies outside the tax code too. But
Okay. So I don't know if you're aware, if you caught this in the book, I'm sure you did, but I think it's off tangent a little bit to what you're talking about right now. In Chapter 3 of the code, which is the withholding of tax on non-resident aliens and foreign corporations, which defines actually who the tax has been imposed upon. In Chapter 3, in the regulations for Chapter 3, it literally states that individual means an alien individual.
oh, but see, the thing is that, like, okay, the reason why I'm asking you about this is because I've been going down this rabbit hole of individual for a long time, and they always use they don't define it. Like, for example, the craziest place that I've never seen any definition of individual is actually Title 8, which is like absolutely crazy, mind blowing, right? They define a person in Title 8 under 8 USC 1101 as an individual or an organization. And then you go down and they have a definition for organization, but there's no definition for individual, right?
So when there's not a statutory definition, according to the Supreme Court, then you have to use the plain meaning rule, which means you go to the dictionary.
And the dictionary definition of individual specifically says that it can include artificial persons.
If a statute designates it as such. But it's like person. Okay, let's use the term person. I'm going to stick to Chapter 26. That's my wheelhouse. Okay, the term person, the default of term person, unless otherwise stated in a definition, includes the natural person, flesh and blood, you and me. Okay, so when people say, for instance, concerning the tax code, that person does not include the natural person. That's not a factual statement for the purpose of the tax code, because natural person is not excluded. Or if the definition is not structured in such a way that it is excluded, then the default for person includes a natural person. Okay, so again, you may be looking at things that I've never looked at, so let me be clear about that. But my understanding is that absent a definition that says otherwise, an individual is just making clear that it's not some sort of an association. It's just
Yeah.
a guy. Now, if there's some deeper implications in that, I would have
Well,
to see. I would have to see that in a particular area of law.
yeah, I'm just bringing it up because I've been doing a lot of case law reading recently, especially from the 1800s, especially pre 14th Amendment, right?
Uh-huh.
And the word natural person is not used anywhere. They say a man of the union. That's
Yes.
typically how they describe it, right?
Yeah.
So the term natural person, right? It's like I've seen so many different things about it, and I'm not completely sold on the fact that it does directly mean a man of the union, right? But the thing is that I've been trying to figure out if it doesn't, if that theory is true, which maybe it's not, but I think it is at this point, then how is it that they get men of the union into this whole system, right? And when I found the sole proprietorship, to me, that is what made perfect sense, because they have the sole proprietorship, right, which falls under the Commerce Clause, by the way, as well, because you have to have, in order for Congress to have plenary power, unlimited power, it has to be under the Commerce Clause. The commerce is the only area that Congress has unmitigated, complete plenary power, right? So, and then the same court case, the slaughterhouse cases, the same court case that divided the country into these two citizenship classes and the birth of the federal U.S. citizen category, which is the slaughterhouse cases from 1873. In that same case, there's literally a quote where Justice Miller says, and I can actually pull it up on the screen.
I'm
This
not ignoring you, by the way, when I'm looking down. I'm searching for something.
That's okay. Yeah, let
Yeah.
me pull up this court case real quick because I wanted to share this with you and get your thoughts on it. Let me just close this out, go down to case law, and then go down to slaughterhouse cases, and this one right here. Here, this one right here. So in that same case where the federal U.S. citizen category was born, the slaughterhouse cases, right? We have this quote here from the guy who's delivering the opinion is Samuel Freeman Miller. He says that whenever a legislature has the right to accomplish a certain result, and that result is best attained by means of a corporation, it has the right to create such a corporation and to endow it with the powers necessary to effect the desired and lawful purpose seems hardly to admit of debate. So, like, to me, we have this court case that birthed this whole new citizenship category, the U.S. citizen category, right? Title 26 of the tax laws are all underneath that federal U.S. citizenship category, which is something that you get into quite a bit in your book, talking about the definition of United States and the various definitions and how it's the District of Columbia, the U.S. territories and insular possessions, and then, which I found that very fascinating, by the way, because some of that stuff I didn't know. And then talking about, but in your book, I don't see you. If I'm wrong, tell me, but I don't see you specifically talking about the difference between a state citizen and a U.S. citizen in relation to, maybe I'm wrong, maybe you did. Can you remind me? I think maybe you did actually talk about this.
I do not. And if you'll allow me, I'll explain why.
Sure.
So I think the distinction between a 14th Amendment federal citizen and a de jure state citizen is a pretty crucial distinction. Let me start with that.
Okay.
Okay. Having said that, if we go back to, say, the Dred Scott case,
Yeah.
okay, the court says in Dred that any privileges that a state citizen derives from the federal Constitution are based on his being a state citizen. Okay.
Hmm.
And because he's a state citizen and the states entered into this compact called the Constitution, then he has certain rights, such as being able to travel freely throughout the states of the Union and so forth. Okay. Well, the same thing, the similar concept applies in international matters. So, for instance, if the federal government came at me for something which relied on 14th Amendment citizenship, I would clearly challenge their ability to show that I'm a 14th Amendment citizen, right? Because the burden of proof is on them, yes?
Correct.
However, if I was a complete fucking idiot and I went to Iran and I got kidnapped by the Iranian government and held as a chip in some bargaining bullshit, okay? What I don't want to have happen, and it doesn't, because internationally it's a different scope, okay? I would not want the U.S. Embassy to say, well, Mr. Champion, we could help you if you're a U.S. citizen, but since you're a state citizen, rot in prison. Okay, and they don't do that. Internationally, citizens of the Union are considered U.S. citizens when dealing in international issues. Okay, just for clarification. Okay, so I wouldn't say this in a court document because I don't believe it's legally accurate enough to characterize that way in a court document, but I think it's a good way for people to look at income tax. And here's what it is. It's a cross-border tax. Okay? It is a tax on them, foreigners, earning income from within the United States. And it's a tax on U.S. citizens earning certain kinds of income outside the country and then sending it back in. Okay? So as a cross-border tax, it is international in character. Also, you read in Income Tax Shattering the Myths that virtually every single authority that Americans think applies to them concerning the income tax actually was vested in the Assistant Commissioner International. Do you remember that part?
Yes, of course. Of
Okay.
course.
So all those authorities were in the Assistant Commissioner International because at its core, its foundation, it is a tax that has an international character. Okay, so speaking internationally, I consider myself a U.S. citizen. Speaking internationally, that is not a 14th Amendment citizen, U.S. citizen. It is not a possessions and territories U.S. citizen. It is a State of the Union citizen if involved in international interplay. Did I express that clearly?
Yeah, I do understand that. I guess my other question involving that same subject is, if the definition of United States is the District of Columbia, its U.S. territories, and insular possessions, then technically California would be international from United States. And
But that's not what the definition says, though.
um,
Pull it up.
the definition
7701A9.
7701. Okay, 26 USC
7701A9.
A9. Let's do it.
And just read it aloud. Yeah.
26 USC 7701 A9 A9. The term United States, when used in a geographical sense, includes only the states and the District of Columbia.
Right. So what was that part about when used in a geographical sense? Because everybody blows right past those words as if they are superfluous. And the Supreme Court has held that there is no word in a statute that is to be considered superfluous, that they all have meaning. And so when used in a geographical sense, has meaning. And with your permission, I'll explain that.
Well, real quick, before you do that, state shall be construed to include the District of Columbia where such construction is necessary to carry out provisions of this title.
They use includes, different set of rules.
Yeah, that's the one you talk about that in the book too, where includes means can also does not exclude things of the same general character or category.
Perfect. Exactly.
So go
But you
ahead. Yeah,
notice,
go ahead and talk about this because
okay.
I'm
So what I'm about to say, the first part of it at least, you're well aware of. Um, Congress has two areas of jurisdiction, two forms of jurisdiction, and only two. Okay? One is subject matter jurisdiction, and that we can simply define for the audience here today as authorities the states granted to the federal government in the Constitution.
which
Okay?
is essentially commerce, internet, foreign agencies coming in, or Indian tribes, or really commerce, right? Am I right on that? That's the
Well,
Commerce Clause.
I would disagree. For
Okay.
instance, the states gave Congress the power to prosecute treason.
Okay.
Okay? And we're going to get into taxation here in a minute as an example, which,
Perfect.
if you want to consider that commerce, okay.
Hmm.
But so the first kind of subject matter, the first kind of jurisdiction Congress has is subject matter, the authorities granted to it by the states. The second kind of jurisdiction Congress has is territorial jurisdiction. Okay? Territorial jurisdiction is limited to D.C., the possessions and territories, and does not extend into the states of the Union. All right? That's the only two forms of jurisdiction Congress has. Subject matter goes everywhere, including the 50 states. Territorial jurisdiction can go everywhere, excluding the 50 states. Okay? So, because remember, 7701A, well, 7701 period, are not subtitle A or income tax specific. 7701 are definitions that apply throughout the entirety of the code when there are many different forms of taxation. So when it says when used in a geographical sense, what it's saying is in areas where we're speaking under our territorial jurisdiction, then it's DC, the possessions and territories and so forth. Taxation is, in its essence, subject matter because, as you know, the states granted Congress the authority to impose direct and indirect taxes, right?
Hmm.
And the three forms of indirect taxes are impost, duties, and excise, and the income taxes and excise. And so when we're reading Subtitle A, or we're reading anything in the code that touches Subtitle A, then that's subject matter jurisdiction. And as such, because it's right there in the Constitution, it's subject matter jurisdiction. There doesn't need to be any qualifier to define what United States means when it's acting in subject matter jurisdiction, because subject matter jurisdiction is 100% of everything. It's the states of the Union, it's DC, it's the possessions, it's territories. However, when Congress says something in a statute or the secretary says something in a regulation that is territorial, then they need to provide a definition to shrink it down to make sure that that's not misunderstood by, I was going to say the casual reader, but it's still going to be misunderstood by the casual reader. But it has to be there someplace in order for the statute to retain constitutionality. There has to be some place that the reader can go and go, oh, this is territorial. This has nothing to do with the subject matter jurisdiction that applies everywhere. So
Yeah.
that's what's being defined in 7701A9. Is it saying when Congress is speaking in its territorial jurisdiction, that's limited thusly.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you familiar at all with because I'm curious about another thing now that you're talking about this. Are you familiar at all with the definition of naturalization, which I cover in like almost everything I do from Title 8?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Not off the top of your head. So check this out. 8 USA 1101, because I do a lot with Title 8. I'm like the Title 8 guy, like you're the Title 26 guy, right? So go down to subsection A23. The term naturalization means the conferring of nationality of a state upon a person after birth by any means whatsoever. So like
Okay.
in
Okay,
my
so
head, when you say that you're a U.S. citizen, It's essentially naturalizing you into the territorial jurisdiction at that point.
Okay, so read that. Read that. I can't see it. It's too small on my screen. Read that definition again.
The term naturalization means the conferring of nationality of a state upon a person after birth by any means whatsoever.
Okay, so you're familiar with the State Department?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean states of the Union. That means other nations. The word state does not have one meaning. So while I would want to go look it up in the definition section pertaining to 1101 that you just shared with me, I would want to go look it up. But I'm going to guess when you do look it up, the definition of state as used right there, not elsewhere, used right there, you're going to find that the definition means is words to the effect of a sovereign nation.
Well, the thing that's crazy about Title 8 is that if you look in every other title, including Title 26, whenever they use the word state, it's capitalized. Mm-hmm. Title 8 is the only place I've ever seen it where the word is not capitalized. They don't capitalize it. And I think that has meaning. When you click on the word state to get a definition of it, it takes you to a different area that's a capital letter definition of the word state. I believe that's the incorrect. I believe that the correct is actually just like you say, even in your book, where there is no definition of lowercase s state, so thus you go to the dictionary, the legal dictionary definition of the word. I think the lowercase definition s defaults to case law and Black's law, and I think the uppercase s is actually what they're defining in the codes. Because I'm telling you, there's multiple places in Title 8 where they don't capitalize the S, and it's not the beginning of a sentence.
So in the next couple of days when we're done here, I'm going to send you a document directly from the Supreme Court that gives the definitions for things like state as used in each kind of legislation.
Oh.
Okay. Yes, I think you'd love that. I'm sorry I didn't think of it when it first hit my desk several weeks ago. A buddy of mine sent it to me, but I'm going to forward it to you because it's sort of the rules of how certain terms that intrinsically have different meanings. So it breaks it down. Like, for instance, we use the word state. What does it mean when it's used in legislation of the 50 states? It tells you in that category. What does it mean when it's used in a federal statute? Got this. What does it mean when it's used in the Constitution? It's got this. So, and if that is the rules of how these words are interpreted when in the filings that are made before the Supreme Court.
Actually, it's so funny because I think someone sent that to me too. Is that... Let me pull up, because this is something I have been trying to figure out how to talk about for a while, and I'm a little bit nervous about it. I'm gonna actually pull this up, and you tell me, is this the document you're talking about? Because this is quite a rabbit hole, my friend. Let me see this one right here. I'm gonna do a screen share. This is going to be trippy, my friend. This is going to be a trippy situation. Here we go. Was not expecting to get into this. Is this the document you're talking about?
That's the one.
God damn. Okay. Okay. So I think this is kind of making the round. So, boy, we're going to go way off the deep end on this, but I'd like to for just a moment, if you don't mind. So,
yeah, my time is your time.
So this document is actually a appendix document to another document. Let me just do a real quick turn off the screen share. Let me pull up the other one. I don't know how I feel about this, guys. I'm going to just be very clear with everybody on the show. And we're just going to cover this for just a moment, right? So I have a lot of mixed opinions here, and you guys can make your own decision. I want to be very clear. Myself, and I'm sure Dave, is not going to be in support of this, but here we are. So that document is an appendix document attached to a petition that was written by a guy named Philip Daniel Love. Okay. This petition is really interesting. It's very, very detailed. It's very impressive. I am currently reading it. Now, there's a problem. The guy was arrested for like manufacturing child porn, and he got caught with a lot of it, and it's like a big deal. And I was like looking through his documents and stuff, and he like pled guilty, and he, according to everything that I read, they like went through every single charge like very, very slowly with him and gave him like opportunities. So some people might think like, oh, he was set up and blah, blah, blah. I've looked into it. I'm not so sure about that. So if anybody sees this document floating around with what Dave is talking about, which it is a very, very cool document, okay? I have to admit. If you type in Philip Daniel Love into the internet, it'll go to the Supreme Court filing, and it's his petition. He's in prison, okay? And he's not getting out ever, probably. And this petition is to try to get a habeas corpus done, right? And they denied his habeas corpus. This was all denied, by the way, by the Supreme Court. They didn't want to look at it, probably because of how extreme his charges are and stuff like that. So I have a lot of mixed opinions about all this, Dave. While the information is absolutely fantastic, I'm vomiting half the time reading it, knowing what could have, without going into terrible, terrible details about all of his information and looking through his whole criminal docket and everything. It's just a weird, I never brought it up because it's just one of those things where the source of the information is so stained, but the information itself, as far as I'm concerned, is I'm literally going through his petition and I'm double checking all of his references and everything seems to be very accurate. So it is an impressive document, but if you were to use it in a court of law, you're using an appendix document from a guy who's basically, I can't even talk about his charges on this show because there's a chance that this video could get flagged or something. It's so bad. So it's just kind of a weird circumstance that I haven't brought up in a show before. But yes, this is what we're talking about, this graph right here on the screen. So make your own decisions on that. I don't know what else to really say for people that are out there. Obviously, I don't think anyone that watches my show, pretty much everyone that watches anything I ever do, they're not going to be down with that at all. I don't think many people are. So I understand that, and I just wanted to be clear about that. But, I don't know. I don't know how to process this particular circumstance. Dave, what do you think about this?
I think the important thing from my point of view concerning Appendix B, excuse me, is that the government didn't refute any of that.
Well, the petition was, he put it up here. I'll show you because I went down this, right? And I was so curious about it myself because someone sent it to me and I go, oh my God, this is amazing. This is amazing. Where in the hell did this come from? Right. So Philip Daniel Love, Supreme Court petition, right? So, if you go to, I forget how I found it exactly. If you go to, and you just kind of hunt around, you'll see here, these are the documents that we're looking at, right? They pop up, right? And if you go, I think I went here, and then I think I went like this, and I like deleted this, and went like this maybe? And then maybe I went Philip Daniel.
You've probably given your audience enough to chase this down. I know we're an hour into the show. We haven't discussed a thing about income tax yet.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So, anyways, if you type in his name, I forget how I found it, but if you type in his name, you can actually find where the actual screen on the Supreme Court thing, the docket item, where
Yeah.
it'll say his name, it'll say that he submitted a petition, and then it'll say that he submitted it in forma pauperis, and then they denied his petition based off of the in forma pauperis thing.
Yeah.
So I just want to be clear about that because it's something I think people should know if they're going to be talking about this particular document or sharing it, and then 2 months go by and then they find out who wrote it. It's going to be, oh boy, that's a hell of a fucking punch in the mouth. So just know, I may share the docket, the item myself later as well, but I'm also going to be clear about who wrote it and what happened with it. So anyways, I was going to say that. So moving on. So the next thing and the primary thing I wanted to talk about on this show, which is funny, there's already been an hour. God, this stuff goes by so fast. It's unbelievable, right? So Dave has a tremendous experience for decades dealing with employment-based difficulties, whether it be with I forget the Gladys or whatever you talk about in the book. HR people or whoever, and then how do you navigate keeping your job and keeping things, keeping the boat from rocking too much, and I wanted to talk to Dave about like what kind of things or resources you mentioned earlier, a letter along with one of your small booklets. I wanted to talk about like any litigation related small claims or otherwise experiences that you've had. Just anything at all that you have, and I think we'll kind of go back and forth on those sorts of experiences and what you found works the best.
Okay. So let's go up to the 35,000-foot level and talk about the fact that when somebody says, I work for somebody else and I want the company to stop withholding from me. Okay. We need to distinguish whether this is a medium or large business or small business. Okay? For the purpose of this discussion, I consider a business small if the person who wants the company to stop withholding probably sees the decision maker on an almost daily basis. Okay, that's my definition of small. So, for instance, let's say I was the worker and Brandon, you're, I don't know, CFO, and there's 47 people in the company, right? So I walk past your office 40 times a day. Okay? So I walk into your office and I say, hey, Brandon, do you have a minute? I've got something I want to talk to you about. And if you don't, that's okay. But can we make an appointment? I shouldn't take more than about 10 minutes, but I'd really like to talk to you about. Okay. Those kind of contacts are where historically people have had the greatest success. And that is predicated on dealing with rational people who, in a small environment where they have to see the same people day in and day out, choose to be rational, choose to be reasonable, choose to exert some common sense. Okay, and in those circumstances, sometimes the truth can prevail, and the company will stop withholding. Okay, when you get beyond that, when you get to the point where if you say to a worker, so your company has an HR department. Yes, it does. How many people do you think work for your company? Oh, I don't know, 700 people maybe. How often do you see the HR director? I've never laid eyes on her. I have no idea even what her name is. Okay, so that's an entirely different set of circumstances. And the odds that a person is going to succeed at having their payroll withholding stopped crash dramatically. Okay, and I think a lot of people imagine that a large company doesn't want to follow the law. Okay. I think that's a misconception. It's not that they don't want to follow the law. It's that they don't give a fuck what the law says. The law is totally irrelevant. It's not like they know it. I know the law, and I'm going to break it every day with 5,000 workers. That's not what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll give you a perfect example. About a month ago, I had a friend who was involved with trying to get his company, a small company, to stop withholding. And he's the number two guy in the company. And there's an owner, and the owner was like, I don't know. I don't want to get in trouble, blah, blah. He says, you know what? Why don't we start this out by you having a conversation with the payroll company? They have use a third party payroll service. Why don't you talk to them, see where that conversation goes? So he asked me, and I agreed to sit in on the call. Okay, I said, but if I'm going to spend my time doing this, not only do we have to have somebody representing the payroll company to bounce things off of and have a conversation with, but if you're going to have me come on the call, and I think it would be safe to say I'm an expert in the subject matter, then I think it would only be fair and reasonable that the company has their expert present as well. I said, because we're not, if I'm the expert and we've got just some guy or gal who's just a rep for the company and doesn't know shit, we're not really going to communicate. So let's get their expert on the call. And that's exactly how it panned out. I was impressed that the payroll company went that far. They made their expert available to participate in the call. And I had also asked, again, if we're going to take our time to do this, everybody should be seated in front of a computer so that we can look at the applicable law together. Okay. And I'm sharing this story to make the point that it's not that they know the law and are breaking it. This story is going to illustrate this. So we get, everybody was very congenial, very professional. Lots of, hi, how are you? How's your day? Yeah. Okay, great. Right up until we started talking about the law. So, right. Okay. So I said, perhaps we should start this conversation off, since this is about payroll withholding. Perhaps we should start this conversation off by looking at 26 U.S.C. 3402, which is the command to deduct and withhold. I said, you've all got a computer in front of you. Let's go ahead and if all of you will pull that up on your computer, then I'll read it aloud. And if you all agree that I'm reading it accurately, nod your heads. I'm joking because we're on the phone. So we brought up 3402A, right? Every employer paying wages is required to deduct and withhold a tax, blah, 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 right? And so I said, thinking this is pretty self-explanatory, I said, so we can all agree this is the command to deduct and withhold, right? The rep says, I don't think we have enough information to agree with you on that. Okay? Mm-hmm. So she's in the business of payroll withholding. It's what they fucking do every day, right? It's their business, payroll withholding. She had no idea whether 3402A was the command to deduct and withhold. And had no idea. And I said, okay, so if that's not it, what is it? She had no answer. Okay. This is a payroll company. So I said, okay, well, I've been at this a long time. Just roll with me. That is. That is the command to deduct and withhold. I said, so now let's back up a section to 3401 and scroll down to see the definition of employee for the purpose of payroll withholding, which I have here someplace, if you will bear with me. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to read this aloud. This is 3401C, the definition of employee for payroll withholding, and it says, for the purpose of this chapter, the term employee includes an officer, employee, or elected official of the United States, a state, by the way, that's territorial, or any political subdivision thereof, or the District of Columbia, or any agency or instrumentality of any one or more of the foregoing. Okay. Clearly, these are all various government jobs, right? The people employed by government. There's nothing in here that could remotely be considered the private sector. And so after we read that aloud, that's when things really went downhill. Okay. Their expert starts getting all worked up in a lather. He's raising his voice like this. And he literally says, I shit you not, what, do you think we are stupid? And I wanted to say, yes. I mean, you're in the payroll business, and this is obviously, the first time you've ever read the definition of employee for the purpose of payroll withholding. So, yes, if you're in that business and you've never read this section, yes, you're stupid. But because I was helping a friend, I was a gentleman, and I said I didn't say that. I'm not implying that. Okay. But that was essentially the end of the call. I mean, it went on for another 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, but that was essentially the end of it. My point being, this is a payroll company. They're not trying to break the law. They don't know the law. And then the rep kept saying, well, the IRS says this, and the IRS says that, and the IRS says the other. Okay, now I want you to pay very careful attention to this part. I said, you keep saying the IRS says, but the IRS is not the law. It's an agency. What we're reading with our own eyes is the law. Should we not be following the law? He says, that is very bad advice.
Yeah, I know these conversations well, and not just in the tax area, and nationality and citizenship and passports, and this is the same. I've had these kinds of conversations with so many people in so many different areas. It's.
I got another one for you because neither of these people were attorneys. So I've got another story, very similar, but about a tax attorney, not just any attorney, a tax attorney.
Oh Lord.
Okay. Same basic scenario. A buddy asked me to get on the phone with him. Yeah, okay. So, and my buddy wanted the company to stop payroll withholding. Same thing, right? And that owner had said, I'm going to hire a tax attorney. I think the owner's perspective was, I'm going to fix your wagon with the tax attorney, right? So we read the definition of employee for the purpose of payroll withholding, which we just read a moment ago. I read that aloud. And I said to the attorney, I said, you're an attorney. You understand what class of person means. And so what class do you see being established by the enumerated items in that definition? And there's this big pause. And I said, clearly, the class is various government workers. So he says, do you see the first appearance of employee? I'm like, what? So I look at it, and I said, and he didn't mean where it says the term employee. He meant the first one after that. So here's what it says. Includes an officer, employee, or elected official of the United States. So he says that the word employee sandwiched after officer and before elected official meant the private sector. Okay. So I said, respectfully, I've been reading tax law for 32 years and reading the court cases interpreting tax law for 32 years. And I've never seen any court make that ruling. Can you please provide, I named my buddy, let's call him Larry for the sake of this call. I said, can you please email Larry those case citations? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I can do that. And you know what? Let's do this. I need to get off the phone right now, and let's touch base on this a couple days down the road.
Yeah.
Okay. So he had never read the definition of employee for the purpose of payroll withholding before. He realized after we read it aloud that he was fucked. He had nowhere to go with that. So he made up this absurd argument. And then as soon as he had an out, as soon as, I'll send those case citations over. I have to get off the phone now. Because he had to go ponder this shit. He's a tax attorney. He'd never read it before. So you want to guess what never showed up?
He never called you. He never came back.
He never emailed those case citations over because they don't exist.
Yeah.
Okay. It was completely fabricated bullshit to get him out of a jam of his own making based on his own ignorance. So I share that, both those stories, to make the point that when we talk about these medium and large size companies, because I think people with some justification get really angry when they show the company the law and the company says, we're not going to do that. Okay.
Well, oh yeah, everybody. I mean, hundreds or thousands of reports. They are absolutely beyond pissed.
Yes. Um, like I said, with justification. What I want to say, though, just to set mental expectations, they're rarely ever saying, Brandon, you're wrong. In all the years that I've been on this playing field, I've never seen a company say, that law you just showed me, as an example, 3401C employee, that is wrong. That's not what it says. I've never heard a company say that. What it really is, let's say you got a company with 1,000 workers. What the company's really saying is, we're not going to do it one way for 999 people and do it differently for you.
Yeah.
Okay. And while that's frustrating and irritating and it can be a source of anger, it's also not telling you that you're wrong. It's them saying, on a practical basis, we're not going to do that. And whether we're wrong or right, there's nothing you can do to make us do it differently. That's what they're saying. So I just thought, and that may be for some people a distinction without a difference.
Yeah.
But I think our emotional response may change based on our perception of what the other person is saying. I think if somebody who knows the truth submits something to the company and they perceive that the company's saying, fuck you, you're wrong, motherfucker, that's going to make that person really angry.
Oh yeah.
But if they perceive that the company is saying, dude, we don't know and we don't care. We do it this way for 1,000 people. We're not going to make an exception for one guy because he sent us some stuff in the mail. That's what they're really saying. So I think that for some people, perhaps, will alter how they view that response.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So with that said, like on our end, I guess just to give you a background on what I've been seeing for a few years is I recommend the W8BEN. And the reason why I do that is because I guess it's the best thing that I know of to use, that it's about a 50% hit rate with the W8BEN, meaning when we use the W8BEN and then we sign it in a certain way without prejudice, which basically reserves all rights, right, and stuff like that. A lot of times we'll sign it as the agent as well, assuming that it's not actually us on the document, but it's actually the sole proprietorship, which I understand ultimately they say is us, but I feel like there's more separation there than what a lot of the courts have said. And then also the court cases that do talk about the separation between the owner and the sole proprietorship, none of them are appeals or Supreme Court cases. They're all just district cases, which means that they are persuasive authority. They aren't actually case law legally, right? So there's a whole thing. I'm kind of digging into all that right now. And then if that doesn't work, which, like I said, the W8BEN has about a 50% hit rate, we do the W4 exempt, which has like a really, really high percentage hit rate. And in fact, in really, really large, really large payrolls, like, for example, working for the city, working for the police, working for the fire department, working for city, they have an online portal, and they go in and they click one button and they become W4 exempt. In fact, I've actually interviewed a lot of like construction workers and stuff, and what they'll do is, this is just goofy. I think this is goofy. What they do is, if they need a little extra cash for, let's say, like Christmas, they'll go in and they'll W4 exempt themselves for like just for November and December, and then come January and they'll turn it off. So I think that's stupid. But anyways, I'm just rolling this out to get your feedback. What is your feedback on the W4 exempt, W8BEN, or other things that you've seen that would, like in your book, I believe, if I remember correctly, you recommend like a custom letter, essentially boiling down the facts, and you don't really recommend any forms being filled out at all. But go ahead and I'll give you the floor on that now. Go ahead and respond to that those situations and extraneous situations.
Okay, so I want to begin by saying that, saying to your audience, okay, that you and I have some deviation on how we see certain areas of the law. Okay,
Yes.
so I want to be very clear. What I'm about to say is coming from my perspective.
Yeah, I
And,
understand that.
well, no, but I want your audience to understand that.
Yeah, that's a
Okay.
good point.
Yeah, I'm not showing up here to say, Brandon, you're wrong.
No.
That's not why I'm here. Okay. So my take on that. As you know from reading Income Tax Shattering Myths, the income tax is imposed on non-resident aliens with U.S. source income and foreign corporations with U.S. source income. Domestic agents are made liable for that tax through the withholding requirement. Okay. That pretty much sums up subtitle A right there. The income tax. I just said it in 2 sentences. It's that
Yeah.
fucking difficult. Okay.
Yeah.
So it took 408 pages to get those to get people to understand those 2 sentences. But yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So because that's my construct, I would never suggest to somebody use a W-8 because they are testing under penalty of perjury that they are a non-resident alien. Okay. And by the way I see things, then they're saying, oh, I'm the guy who owes the tax. Come for me down the road a bit. Yeah, I didn't have any withholding done, but I'm the guy. Okay, so that's why I would not favor that approach. As far as the exempt, there's a couple of issues with that, and I'll let the individual person in the audience decide how important those issues are to them. Okay. So the only person in law who's permitted to execute a Form W-9 is a non-resident alien who is in the employ of any government entity that is under the exclusive legislative jurisdiction of Congress, which of course is not the states of the Union, right? And as such is receiving U.S. source income. Okay, that's the sole context or construct of a Form W-4. It doesn't apply to anyone else. So when somebody signs a W-4, they're saying under penalty of perjury, I am a non-resident alien receiving U.S. source income. And of course, if they're working for Joe Blow's plumbing company, they don't even get that form is only applicable when they're working for certain government entities, right? That's like the furthest thing from their mind. They don't get it at all. So then when they go exempt, and we're talking about definitions, right? That definitions don't necessarily mean in law what they mean in the dictionary, right? So if you lined 100 people up and if you said exempt, what does exempt mean? They would say it doesn't apply to me. That's what exempt means. Okay. But that's not what exempt means to the IRS in context of a Form W-4. For a W-4, exempt means there's several reasons a person, according to the IRS, can claim exempt. I'm just going to give you an example because it makes their understanding clear. Okay, so let's say a non-resident alien overpaid on their withholding by $30,000 last year. So going into Jan 1 of the upcoming year, they can claim exempt from payroll withholding until they zeroed out that $30,000 overpayment. And then they have to go back on the withholding schedule. Okay. The IRS considers that completely righteous. That's their idea of what the exempt status exists for. Okay. That said, signing a W-4 is still saying under penalty of perjury they're a non-resident alien with U.S. source income who is the class upon whom the tax has been imposed, right? So there's a problem with that in my book. The exempt thing, and I heard you clearly about the online portal, okay? However, when you look at the 2025 Form W-4, exempt doesn't exist anymore, okay? And these private portals haven't caught up with that yet. There is no checkbox on the 2025 form for exempt. Okay. Now, that's one thing that's problematic. People are claiming something that the current form doesn't offer, and the current form is the only valid form. Once a new revision has been released, the old revisions are not valid anymore.
I think in the instructions of that it still says, right, the word exempt under 4C, right? It doesn't say that. Oh my God, really?
No,
I would need to,
really.
holy shit, I would need to
What it,
check.
what it says now is that you are supposed to go to a particular field on the last 1040 you filed. So who does that tell you this is all about, right? 1040s are only to be used by non-resident aliens with U.S. source income or the non-resident alien's domestic agent in the course of representing the non-resident alien, right? So when they say go to field such and such on the form 1040, right there they're saying you
Yeah, you're
are a non-resident alien. Okay.
yeah.
But then they tell you to take that number and put it on this line of the W-4. Okay. So basically what they're saying is, I'm going to phrase it my way, not what the form says. Okay. Pick the amount of money you don't want withheld and write it in numerically. So let's say a guy's every pay period, he's on a salary, so he knows it's $550 comes out of every paycheck. Okay. So, and let's say he wanted to go exempt on a form that no longer has exempt. Okay. So on that particular line, he would write $550, which would accomplish the same thing without there being an exempt box or an exempt option.
Do you think they're doing this because of the explosion of interest and activity with all the people doing this all over the? Because I mean, I'll tell you, I got 100,000 people doing this shit right now.
I've been at this, well, helping people. I've been at this probably about 28 years. I have never seen the interest level what it is today.
It's just off the charts. I mean, I can't even.
Yeah. Now, I want to warn you about this because it was a shocker to me in 2008. Okay. 2008 had, 2004, 5, 6, 7, leading up to 2008, had the same dynamic that you're experiencing right now. It's like, fuck, everybody wants to get on board and, do the right thing and stop paying taxes that don't apply to them. The movement was huge. It was growing. It was vibrant. And then the economy tanked. And essentially, by about September 2008, the tax honesty movement evaporated.
Wow.
And here was the reason. You remember people were struggling mightily at the end of 2008 going into 2009, right? People with, a bunch of kids and a mortgage, suddenly, they got fired or laid off from their jobs. They couldn't find a job because the economy had tanked so hard, right? So my estimation of what happened, because it was like, boom, almost overnight, okay? Nobody wanted to talk about this anymore. And my take on it was, who wants to argue about whether they should fill out this form or that form or not do this or have a discussion with HR or bring up, I'm not a taxpayer or whatever the thing is, if they don't know where they can get any money next week to feed their kids? Okay? And Brandon, it happened so fast, it was unbelievable. It was like suddenly the entire tax honesty community went silent. And then, of course, there's a lot of stuff in the media now about the economy might be heading towards a recession. And if it's another 2008 type recession, I'll be interested to see if the same dynamic repeats itself, or whether people after COVID and their distrust of government and whatnot has increased greatly. I'm wondering if the response will be different this time. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I am not. The tax thing, I don't know. You probably already are aware of this, but I'll just go ahead and say it. It's just a small part of what I do. I mean, my main.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
My core part of everything that I do is I'm actually going to be writing. I haven't even told my audience this yet. I actually am writing a letter to Justice Clarence Thomas. Justice.
I thought that core thing was you doing porn on TikTok.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. Okay. So besides that, pushing that out of the way. Okay. That's.
Have you given out the link to your OnlyFans page?
Damn, I haven't even told my audience yet. That's coming soon. Okay. It's attached to my Patreon account. Yeah, no, but it's the destruction of either the 14th Amendment or the slaughterhouse cases. Either overturn the slaughterhouse cases, which Judge Clarence Thomas has already talked about. I actually found a bunch of quotes about him online talking about that he wants this to happen. And I was like, oh my God. So I'm actually going to write to him. I actually already have the letter written and everything. Or just get rid of the 14th entirely. That's really what we push mostly on, is the 14th entirely, because in 1967 there's a whole huge thing where in the congressional record they were talking about how the 14th Amendment was never even legally ratified, and they have all the evidence there, and it's like this whole thing, right? So
Sure.
if the 14th Amendment goes bye-bye, or if the slaughterhouse cases is overturned, then the U.S. citizen category evaporates. Okay,
Well,
so
one definition of U.S. citizen evaporates.
yes. So we'll go back to, well, the idea that there is a federal citizenship at all evaporates. Let's say that.
Except for the possessions and territories.
Yes, but
If you look in Title 48, Congress, separate from the 14th Amendment, has extended U.S. citizenship to, for instance, people who live in Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and so forth.
and then American Samoa and stuff, they have the non-citizen national stuff, right?
Correct.
So I'm
Correct,
aware of
yes.
all that. I'm aware of all that, but I believe, this is a theory of mine, I believe even that decision is based upon the idea of the slaughterhouse cases. Maybe not, but I have a feeling if the slaughterhouse cases goes or the 14th goes, Congress will not have the ability to bestow U.S. citizenship on anybody or anything. That's my own theory. Maybe
Okay.
I'm wrong. But the thing is that, just like you say in your book, Congress only has what we've given it. And the thing is that if it wasn't for the 14th and it wasn't for the slaughterhouse, there would be absolutely no anything of all. There'd be no other category. There'd be only one category, and that'd be the end of it. And we would either need to make places like Puerto Rico and all that a state, or they're just up shit creek without a paddle, or there would have to be some other thing that would need to get. If they overturned slaughterhouse, maybe they would cover all that in the new case that overturned it, and they would have to describe how that's going to work and what's going to happen and all that kind of stuff, right? But basically, like, that's the core, and then obviously that goes a lot into like what makes up a nation, what makes up diplomatic immunity, what makes up international relations, what blah 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 blah, and then that goes into taxation, and then there's all these offshoots. But essentially, like, the core part of my whole platform is the 14th or slaughterhouse, and then due to the amount of interest in the subject, negotiable instruments, banking, negotiation, endorsements, and all of that, the financial arm of my research has become, people looking from the outside in on my platform, they probably think that's like the top, which it kind of is, but the 14th is probably just barely right above that, right? So
Can I offer something that I think is important about the 14th in government actions?
yeah,
Okay. So, speaking just for myself, if the government brought an action against me, and by the way, I advocate that everybody uses, including, because we know that the purpose of the 14th Amendment was to bestow a second form of citizenship upon the free black slaves. Right?
yeah.
So, but yet the government acts like it applies to all of us, okay, when it does not. Okay. So, and
Well,
the
we all
government
say
knows
it does, and then
Well,
that's how they get. I think that's how they get subject matter jurisdictions, because we all say we are. But anyways, it's a whole different subject.
Yeah, yeah. So when I advocate that when the government, anytime the government brings an action against anybody, administrative, judicial, what have you, where it relies, and I don't mean supposition, it might, could have, maybe rely on the 14th Amendment. It clearly is a statute that relies on its authority, relies on the 14th Amendment for its authority. I advocate that people file a motion seeking the government to prove, denying they are a 14th Amendment citizen, and file a motion seeking the court to order the government to provide the evidence that whoever it is, the defendant, is a 14th Amendment citizen. I don't know anyone who's ever done that, by the way. I discovered the truth about the 14th Amendment probably 30 years ago, and in 3 decades, I've never seen anybody do that. Okay. My supposition is that the first time that's done, the government will move for dismissal on some trumped up bullshit. Okay. Not dismissal of the motion, dismissal of the action.
Because they don't want that. That's the one thing on the planet. Like that is literally the nightmare, waking up screaming like a baby in their little crib, just at the absolute terror. The idea that argument would go to an appeals court and then thus to the Supreme Court is the absolute, complete government worst nightmare.
I would say tied right up there with the truth of the income tax getting into a court.
Yeah.
Okay. Those two things terrify the government. I'll tell you a funny story. I don't know if you're aware, I grew up in California. I lived in California until I was 47. And I got mailed a jury summons from the county of Los Angeles, whatever it was, 30 plus years ago. And of course, like question number 4, something is, are you a citizen
US
of the United States? Yeah. So I wrote to the jury, like the jury commission supervisor, something like that. I found out who it was, that the official title for the county. It runs all that kind of operations. And I sent her a very polite letter. And I said, the document you sent me requires its signature under penalty of perjury. Committing perjury is a felony, so I want to make sure I'm doing this correctly. I noticed that you asked me to declare whether I am a citizen of the United States. However, I know from my research that phrase, citizen of the United States, has different meanings in different areas of law. Could you please provide me with the source of the definition you're using in question 4? Wow,
okay.
Right. So
might as well just pull the pin on a hand grenade and toss it in their office.
So I'm guessing these days I would never get a response.
Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah.
But back then, I think they were still trying to be somehow responsive to the citizenry. So she sent me a letter back, and it said, "Citizen of the United States, as used in question 4, is derived from the 14th Amendment."
Yeah. Boom. Bingo.
Okay. Right. So, on my jury summons for question 4, I checked no.
Yep.
Signed it and sent it in, and never heard back from them. Now,
so I've seen dozens, if not hundreds of these. That's all they do. They check the box, they sign it, they send it in. They're actually taken off the jury rolls.
Right. But my position is, since you're aware, they can issue a warrant for you, right? Not saying they do in every case, but they have the ability to issue a warrant if you don't send that back in.
Yes, that's correct.
And whether it's righteous or not, okay, the warrant, it's still going to be an imposition. You're going to be driving down this thing, taking your kids to their sporting event, and all of a sudden you're hauled off to jail, right?
Yes.
So that's not a good thing. That's why I believe it's important to send the letter, okay?
I see.
So that no one's going to issue a warrant once the answer was provided, okay?
I mean, I've seen a lot of these just from personal experience. I don't know how many you've seen, but I've never seen it to be an issue. Obviously, when you sent yours in, did you send it in certified or registered mail or something, and to just ensure delivery, or did you go in and physically drop it off, or you just did normal?
It comes, the jury summons, at least in California, it's a, what's that legal term for when they don't have to pay postage?
Oh yes, I know what you're talking about.
It's free because it's a government document. Okay.
Yeah.
That's supposed to only apply to the feds, but it's extended to things like jury summonses and things like that. So it was, we'll call it prepaid. All I had to do was sign my name, peel the little strip off, fold it over, and stick it in the mailbox, which is exactly what I did.
Okay.
But I had her letter saying it's the 14th Amendment, and which brings me back to my point, which is, if you want to claim that I committed perjury because I checked no and signed my name, I'm totally down with you making that allegation.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Now prove it.
Now that
Because your
I
name,
don't
your
think they're ever going to do that. They're never ever going to
no,
do
they're going
that.
to walk away from the suit.
Yeah.
So you read about the Wesley Snipes case in Income Tax Shattering the Myths, right? So
A little bit. Is there a lot in there, or just?
no. So, but here's the point I make. Maybe it's not in that. Maybe I did it in a video. I don't remember what year he got. Anyway, after he was indicted, his people reached out to me. Hollywood stars always seem to have people, right? So his people reached out to me and they said, "We'd like you to participate on his defense team." And I was like, "Yeah, hell yeah!" I, s- I said, nothing gives me wood more than the idea of completely beating down the fucking tax division of the IRS. I'm sorry, of DOJ. So I was like, hell yeah. I said, but, and I said, if we submit the right information to the court, the government will petition the court to dismiss the indictment
Yeah.
because it cannot risk having that information brought into the court. Okay? I said, but if you want to do that with me, you need to give up this kooky 861 thing because it's not factual. It's not good law.
Yeah,
Okay.
the exemption. Yeah.
And his people said to me, 861 is the hill that Wesley is willing to die on. That's a quote. And I said, okay, then I am unable to be of assistance to you. Thank you for the call. And we all know how that story ended. Okay. So, how we position these things, whether it's the jury summons, writing and getting the answer to the 14th Amendment, whether it's Wesley Snipes, if we had presented, for instance, here's just one example. You read about the Treasury decisions, right? The 1040s are only to be used by non-resident aliens or their domestic agents, right?
That's in your book.
Yes. So when I wrote the book, we knew of 8 of them. Okay. Then over a couple of years after that, I found 2 more. And then probably just 6 months ago, a buddy of mine that's been at this longer than I have, he sent me a Treasury decision. And he said, hey, man, when you get some time, read this. Unrelated to the whole 1040 issue, right? So I'm at the gym, I'm doing cardio, and I'm reading this thing. There it is. Non-resident aliens with U.S. source income or their domestic agent is to use Form 1040 revised. Okay. So now, at this point in 2025, we know of 11 of them. Okay. So I don't know if your audience is aware of this. There is no statute in the tax code, none, that discusses who is to use a Form 1040. If we drill down to the regulations, right? The regulations is supposed to put the meat on the bone, yes?
Yeah.
The Supreme Court has referred to sometimes the language that Congress uses in the statutes as, and I quote, the broad language of the statute, okay? Which broad language does not give you all the detail, okay? So then the regulations written by whatever department has authority over a particular area of law, the regulations are supposed to put the meat on the bone. The example I give is a statute might be 3 paragraphs. A regulation that details how that's going to be carried out in the real world might be 8 pages. Okay. So in all of the regulations, the job of which is to provide the detail, never mention who's to use a Form 1040. Okay. So you have to go past the statutes, past the regulations, down to the Treasury decisions, where we find 11 Treasury decisions saying that a Form 1040 is to be used by a non-resident alien or the domestic agent. In opposition to that, there are precisely 0 Treasury decisions saying the American citizen earning his or her own domestic source income in a State of the Union is to use a Form 1040. Okay? So when we talk about things like the kind of evidence that we would submit in documentation before the court that would cause the U.S. government to withdraw the suit or ask to dismiss the indictment, okay? Where would they find the authority to say Wesley Snipes should have signed a Form 1040? There is absolutely 0, nothing in the statutes, nothing in the regs, nothing in the Treasury decisions. Conversely, There are 11 Treasury decisions that say that 1040 is to be used by non-resident alien foreign corporations, or not non-resident aliens, or their U.S. source, their U.S. agent. So, if you made that argument, what could the government show? It doesn't exist. So, and there's so many things like that, that if you said to the government, here's what we're going to present as evidence before the court, here's what we're going to get your IRS experts on the stand and ask them about. We're going to subpoena the chief criminal investigator for the Treasury Department. And we're going to ask him or her these questions. Okay. The government would be like, Your Honor, we would like to dismiss this action. They cannot risk it going into court, just like you were saying about the 14th Amendment. They cannot risk it. They've got, it is such a power base for them, whether it's the 14th Amendment and trying to wrangle citizens through legislation that pertains to just the free black slaves and their posterity, as per the Supreme Court statement, whether they're trying to wrangle people with that, whether they're trying to wrongly convince Americans, at the average Joe, that he owes income tax. There's so much we know today that they cannot allow to go into a courtroom, that if you present it to them and say, this is what we're going to do if you move forward, they're going to be like, we're out.
Yeah, because. Now,
the problem is, if you're not going to go pro se, the problem is finding an attorney to make these arguments. I've been at this a long time.
Never going to happen.
Yeah, so there was an attorney that read Income Tax Shattering the Myth just a couple of years, in Utah, if I remember correctly, just a couple of years after it was published. Actually, a family friend asked him to read it. And I think the family friend was saying, like, you're an attorney, what are your thoughts on this? And the attorney came back and said, everything in it is accurate, and I would never make any of these arguments in court.
No, I mean, totally.
Yeah, and when when his family members said, well, why is that? He said, because I work in this courthouse with these judges, with these attorneys, day in and day out. And I don't want to be mocked and derided every day of my life moving forward because I brought these arguments into court. So he was admitting it's all true, but he would be mocked and derided by the judges and by his fellow legal industry professionals if he went into court with the truth. How insane is that? Can you imagine any other area of law where an attorney would say, oh, yeah, I see it right there, black and white, totally right, and I'm not going to go into court and make that argument?
Yeah. I mean, you know my platform, man. You know, I'm the guy. I'm the guy who, when it comes to don't you dare take on an attorney and you're just slitting your own fucking wrists if you do so. I'm the guy who that's all I talk about. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that's great for the people who follow you. But of course, just like me, the people who follow you is this tiny, tiny scintilla of the overall American population.
Yeah.
So the average Joe, for instance, if you read Income Tax Shattering the Myth and wanted to bring an action in court against somebody, the average Joe would have to go find an attorney.
Yes.
And that's a problem. That's not finding an attorney to argue the truth.
There's nothing that I teach in nationality citizenship. If someone wanted to sue the Department of State, there's nothing that I teach with negotiable instruments, literally to the point where you wouldn't even need to hardly say anything. You would just list commercial code points. And the point, let's say even in the IRM, that point that I showed you in the last video in the IRM, they're talking about how if the IRS receives a bill of exchange, a registered bill of exchange on behalf of a taxpayer to settle the account on FedWire, that's all part of my financial arm of my research, right? All of that stuff, all the tax stuff, literally everything I teach in every single area, I don't think there's going to be an attorney anywhere that would touch any of it in any area for any amount of money.
So you're probably aware that, I don't know what it is, 15 years ago now, Congress passed a law that you can't get a passport if you have a significant amount of income tax that the government deems is past due. Okay, they will not issue you a passport.
Yeah.
Now, a friend of mine did not need a passport, but he went down and applied for one because he wanted to see how this worked out. He hasn't filed a tax return in like 40 years. Okay. So, and the State Department wrote back and said, we can't issue you this because you owe a substantial amount of back taxes. Now, mind you, he hasn't filed nothing. Okay. So this isn't based on like returns and then he didn't pay. This is just made up shit. So he sent a Freedom of Information Act request to the IRS. And he said, what system of records is this information maintained in? And send me a copy of what's in there concerning me and whatever is in your manual about how that system of records interacts with the State Department.
Ooh,
Okay.
beautiful.
Right. Oh, he's a smart guy. So we were talking, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks ago. And he said, so I sent this FOIA 5 years ago. He said, I just got a letter from the IRS asking if I still wanted that information. Five
Wow.
years after he sent the FOIA. But that's how significant is their effort not to let the cat out of the bag.
Yeah.
Okay? Because once he had that information via the Freedom of Information Act, then he could start to pick it apart in court. Then he could start to show that let me rephrase that. He could file something and the IRS would be unable to show that he ever owed a penny for the
Yeah.
reasons we just talked about, such
Yeah.
as the 1040 argument and many other arguments. When he said, how is my name in this file? The government would not be able to factually answer how his name is in that file.
Did he ever get the info?
No. Like I said, 6 weeks ago, the government sent him a letter saying, we came across your FOIA. Do you still want the information? It's 5 years old. Okay. And that's not an accident. They don't want to give him the information because they know once he has those documents in his hand, he can go to court and the IRS will not be able to make its case. And then the IRS, I'm sorry, one of my cats is messing around here. Okay. So I didn't even know I still had a cat in my studio. It's been hiding someplace. So anyway, yeah, so they know what would happen if they surrendered that information to him. So and I'm guessing that letter that he got like 6 weeks ago, somebody there made a mistake. Like they said, like, what is this? It's 5 years old. We should follow up with this guy. Where
Yeah.
the more seasoned people would have been, no. There's a reason in 5 years we haven't responded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is he gonna? What's his plan? Is he gonna file a civil suit against the Department of State and the IRS? Because I've seen some people do that recently too.
I don't know what his plan is, and until he gets that, he may file a lawsuit in the federal court to enforce the Freedom of Information Act request, because this sounds absurd in reference to 5 years. The IRS is required to respond within 20 days or ask for an extension, according to the Freedom of Information Act. They never did either.
Yeah.
They did not respond within 20 days. They did not request an extension, and 5 years later, they've not responded. So, he may choose to enforce the request, and the judge will, if he chooses to go that path, the judge will order the files turned over to him.
Yeah.
And then the IRS is in a world of hurt
Yeah.
because he can literally force them to remove his name from that file
Yeah. Yeah.
or force a judge to order it revoked.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have been on a long time, my friend. What else do we have to talk about as we close? I know I heard my wife coming home and
Yeah, I just wanted to get any more. It's just so many interesting things to talk about with you. It's so fascinating. I would like to go back to just what. So the WBEN, let's say, is out. If the W-4 exempt is out. So what do you go in? You speak to Gladys. Gladys tells you to go fuck yourself. What do you? You've been doing this for a long time. What do you do small claims? Do you do any small claims cases or what like because this is the point when people are starting to have pretty awful, I want to say borderline violent thoughts are starting to go through people's head by this point. So this is the point, obviously, where we are struggling. The people who are struggling, this is where we're struggling. So that's kind of where, I guess I would want to know more from you in terms of tips, tricks, ideas, what you've seen work, doesn't work, what to do, small
Okay.
claims.
So you're familiar with due process. I don't need to explain that to you.
Yeah.
Okay. Due process is at its fundamental the right to be heard. And of course, commensurate with that is that whatever you submit is objectively evaluated. Because obviously, if the government said, sure, you have a right to due process, you send them something and they go, ha, 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 and throw it in the trash. That's the facade of due process. That's not really due process, right? Due process requires objective analysis and evaluation of what you submit. So what I suggest people do is to lay it all out for the company. And then when the company doesn't respond, by the way, there's no way to force them to do what you want. Okay. So the company, an employee can go exempt, or the employee can, on the new form, write in the amount they don't want taken out of their check. They can do those things. And then down the road, should they ever get that letter from the IRS that says, hey, man, we think you owe us a tax return because we got these information returns. Okay. Then they've created an evidentiary record, okay, with which they can not just tell a story, but tell a story supported every step of the way by evidence. Okay? Yes, and there are ways to do that, way too lengthy to get into today. But that's the framework of it. A person has to be prepared. And I should say, just so people understand, when the government sends that letter and they say, hey, man, we think you owe us a tax return, it doesn't really mean what it says. What it really means is the federal courts require us to extend you an opportunity of due process. So since we have an allegation we're making about you right now, along with that allegation, we must extend you the right of due process to tell us if we are wrong. Okay? It basically, that letter that says you owe us a tax return is really, the way I like to characterize it, is it's an invitation to engage in due process. So you and I have been talking, you just read Income Tax Shattering the Myths. You know the whole story, right? We've been talking about the definition of employee for the purpose of payroll withholding. We've been talking about the Treasury decisions for the 1040, blah, 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 blah. And your audience may not know, but you know how much more detail, mountains of evidence are in Income Tax Shattering the Myths, right?
God,
so, yes. So what one has to be prepared to do is accept the invitation to engage in due process and blow the IRS out of the water so they go away. If I can give somebody some tips or pointers on that, they can always reach out to me at dave@drreality.news. By the way, that's not doctor spelled out, it's DR reality. So they can email me at dave@drreality.news.
Perfect. So that would apply for somebody who was doing like a W-8 BEN or W-4 exempt or one of the other kind of. But again, back to the original. Like, let's say you're trying to get a new job and they want you to fill out something, and then you have the talks and they say no, and then they shoo you off. I guess I'll just directly ask you, have you ever seen anyone use small claims or something like that as a way to sort of like press these people?
Not for the W-4, W-2 issue, because small claims is almost certainly going to result in the person being terminated. Okay. The minute the company has served the small claims papers, they're going to say, Brandon, you're out of here. We don't need this bullshit. Where it has been successful is in people who are being asked to file a Form W-9, okay? And they decline to file a Form W-9. For your audience, that's people in business to business. It has nothing to do with being an employee, okay? So they declined to file a Form W-9, so the company for which they did the work either refuses to cut them a check or withholds 30%, okay, backup withholding, okay? So in those cases, I've seen people go to small claims court, and I only suggest people go to small claims court if they've had a conversation with the company in the first place, because the same negative consequence can happen if you take them to small claims court and it's a shock to them. Okay. So what I suggest is that people say, you know, respectfully, what you're threatening is illegal. It doesn't comply with the law, but I don't want to fight with you. I love you guys. I hope you love my work. I want to keep working with you. I want to keep getting your money. I want to keep doing the good thing for you. Aside from this paperwork issue, we're good. Okay. So here's my suggestion, man. I'm going to file small claims for the amount that you're not paying me. The judge is going to order you to pay me. And then you can use that. You can put that in the file and say, I have to pay him because I pulled this, I'm not paying you without a W-9 thing, or I pulled the backup withholding card, and he took me to small claims court, and the judge agreed with him, not me. So basically, if it's an agreed upon course of action, it serves as a source of immunization for the company that's making the payment.
Mm. Do you ever see anyone like offer like release of liability, or is there any other type of little tactics that people use to try to make places more comfortable with filing certain documents or not filing certain documents, or is there anything like that that
Sure.
you've seen that works?
Well, there are documents that I call reliance documents. And what
I
a
think
reliance document, go
I
ahead.
think your camera turned off or popped
Oh,
off.
hang on. Let me see what's going on. Is that better?
There we go. That's it. Go ahead.
Okay, yes. Some little window popped up on my phone. I thought it was part of the app. Sorry about that. So the reliance document can be used, and it basically says it's basically an affidavit, is what it is, and it says, you know, I am officially under penalty of perjury for which I can be prosecuted for a felony if I'm lying to you. I'm exaggerating, but you get the point, right? I'm telling you, I'm not this guy, I'm not that guy, I'm not required to do this, blah, 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 and you're not required to do that in reference to me. Okay. Signed under penalty of perjury. Here, stick this in your payment files. If the government ever says why is, as an example with a W-9 1099 scenario, why isn't there a 1099 on Brandon? He gave us this letter signed under penalty of perjury. Okay. And there's a whole thing. You read it in Income Tax Shattering the Myths, where there is no fine, because everybody says I'm going to get fined if I don't file a 1099. And you remember there's a whole part in there where if it's for good cause, they can't be fined. And part of good cause is defined as you didn't give them a number.
Mm.
Yeah.
A number meaning a social security number?
Well, I'm guessing the person who's demanding a W-9 would call it a taxpayer identification number or an EIN. Same difference for the purpose of this conversation. Yeah.
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 So have a conversation, preferably not with HR or Treasury, but try to get a hold of someone like a CFO or somebody who's more likely to talk to you. Have a nice conversation, show them as much as you can, and try to get kind of like a interesting kind of conversation going.
Yeah.
If the whole thing just goes to shit, in every direction, then at that point you would just let them know that, you're not comfortable with this, and then, let them know after trying many times to have the conversation that you'll be filing a small claims case. File the small claims case, get it served, and then I guess part of the damages would be financial, but then also part of the relief that you'd be asking in the small claims case is an injunction.
Doesn't have the authority. Small claims court doesn't have that authority. Small claims court cannot issue an injunction. A small claims court is a specialty court. It's not a court of general jurisdiction. So that's why I say this should be, I don't want to say agreed on, but it should be mapped out in advance by the person who intends to be the plaintiff. So let's say you're the evil CFO, okay, and I'm the guy who doesn't want to sign a W-9. Okay, I would be like, so here's I think a solution that will work for both of us, Brandon. So don't pay me, don't cut me that check that I'm here to get today. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you to small claims, but it's not adversarial, Brandon. That's not my motivation here. I don't want to be adversarial with you at all. I want us to have a great relationship. I understand you have these uncomfortable feelings about the W-9 issue and what I've told you about it today. So what I want to do is I want to protect you, Brandon. I want to protect your company. I want to immunize you. So for me to be a good guy and protect you, I want to file a small claims action. Then we'll both show up in small claims. The judge will order you to pay me. You put that in the file. And if the IRS asks you 7, 8, 9, 10 years down the road, why didn't you 1099 this guy? If I have an order from a court, then I have to pay him without a number. Okay? It's a discussion where you're trying to put solutions on the table. A lot of this is not, I'm going to ram it down your throat. Because in a lot of cases, you can't. I mean, imagine a guy, he's got 4 kids at home, he's got a mortgage, he's got car payments, he's got health insurance, blah, 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 right? He owns his own business. And imagine he's talking to a company that at that particular moment in time provides 40% of his overall income. Okay? He doesn't have the freedom to say, you know, I've tried this the nice way. I've tried to show you the law. So looky here, motherfucker. This is how this is going to go down. Okay? Because all that's going to happen is the guy is going to say, we're not doing business anymore. Bye.
Yeah.
And then that guy just lost 40% of his income and can't make his mortgage payment. Okay?
Yeah.
So not everybody's in a position, well, very few people are in a position where they can force the other person's hand. Okay? Where I've seen this very successfully is kind of a humorous thing. People who have a very rare skill set that really hard to find, and that skill set is critical for the company that's making the payment. I have literally seen people tell the company, hey, this thing that's costing you $1 million a month in damages because your software's fucking up and the company that sold you the package can't fix it. Okay. They lied to you about what it would do and wouldn't do. Okay. So now it's costing you $1 million a month. I can create a workaround for you on that to save you that $1 million a month. They're like, you're hired. Okay, but by the way, I want you to know I don't sign W-9s. I don't give a fuck. Fix this problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people who have very unique in-demand skills all they have to do is say, by the way, I'm not going to sign any of this form or that form. And the other people will say, okay, that's fine. Because they want what they want. Okay. But if you're just let's say somebody's carpet cleaner, right? So when businesses are closed at night, he goes in and he cleans the business's carpets. Okay. He has no power in that arrangement, because if he gets chesty with any of his customers, they'll say, dude, there are 57 carpet cleaners waiting to get this contract from me. So sign the form or you're out. So it doesn't do us much good to destroy those business relationships.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I think that's actually the most positive answer as well. I mean, I guess that the answer in a nutshell is get so goddamn good at your job, which, you know, you'd be surprised if you buckle down and start watching videos and reading books and you take your whatever it is that you do for a living really, really seriously. People would be shocked how much better you can get at what you do in such a short period of time, a few months, 3 months,
Yeah.
6 months. If you're really focused, 3 to 6 months can be the difference between a novice and somebody who's actually really skilled in what they do. And the more skilled that you are, and the better relationship that you have with the people in whatever business or whatever company that you're in, and it just increases your chances that you can pull something like this off.
Yes, and I encourage people to always be upbeat. Okay, so let's say somebody wants a company to stop withholding. Let's say the guy, I don't know, he works in the warehouse, right? And he wants the company to stop withholding. When he goes and he sits down with the director of HR, payroll, or something, I encourage people to have a great attitude. Hey, I wanted to talk to you about something. I got to tell you before we start, it's kind of fun. It's going to blow your mind, So don't go in and like, hey, man, you're stealing my shit. We need to get this straightened out because you're fucking with me, right? That's, The conversation's over before it starts. But if you're upbeat and you make it sound like, oh my God, you're going to you're gonna freak when I show you this. You and I are gonna be like the only two people in the whole company who know this. It's awesome. Okay. Try and create some rapport. Be upbeat. Smile. Make yourself likable, to the extent that's possible. Um, excuse you.
No, I think that's a great answer. Honestly, I think
Scar
that's
would like.
probably
Scar has much better solutions than I do.
well. Hey, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. What if you went to the CFO with your cat?
Yeah.
That's pretty genius. That's
Yeah.
pretty genius. Bring your cat in there. Be like, hey man, me and Mr. Meowie Mittens wanted to come and talk to you for a minute. About something really exciting. You know what I mean?
Well, we are well over 2 hours.
Yes,
If
I
you
was
don't
just
mind,
going to round it out.
yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you so much for the talk. Thank you so much for the book. Again, recommended. Oh, I wanted to ask you one last thing. Takes 2 seconds. Now, granted, this could mean your phone's getting hit up by hundreds of people, but so just be careful with how you answer this one. Do you offer any sort of personal consulting or personal work or one-on-one work with people who are attempting to walk through this maze / flaming rings of trying to get their employer to do any of this stuff or anything like that? And again, your answer, this is, could mean hundreds and hundreds or thousands of people call you. I don't know. So I'm just forewarning you. If you could answer, that'd be great.
I will assist people to the best of my ability. How's that?
Okay. Do you have a standardized fee for that, or do you do
No.
anything? Okay. So just contact you for more information as regards to maybe that's possible, maybe it's not. Essentially, is the answer to that question.
A lot of it has to do with the amount of free time I have available to assist people, things like that.
And how would someone contact you if they desired to get more information on that subject?
Simply email me at dave@drreality.news and say, hey, man, I've got this issue. Can you help me out?
There it is. Now, would you work with someone on that basis if they hadn't read your book? Or do you only work with people who are either read your book or are reading your book, or is that not part of your...
Well, I guess I don't have some sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, policy about it.
Okay, good.
But I think a conversation about what's really happening in their situation would be more challenging if they had not read the book. You know my philosophy. I don't ever want anyone to take my word for anything. Okay. Do not believe me. Go research it for yourself. Okay. So if somebody were to call me and ask me, say, hey, man, I've got this situation. Can you give me some guidance on this? And they've never read Income Tax Shattering the Myths. They basically have to take my word for everything. And I hate that. I don't want to be in the position of talking without them knowing what I'm saying is true. And I don't want them in the position that they have to suspend their own knowing because Dave Champion said so. No, that's bullshit. Okay.
Yeah.
So, obviously my preference by a long, long way would be that if somebody is going to reach out to me, that we could at least talk the same language.
So they should at least be moving through the book at a minimum.
Yes, absolutely.
That makes the most sense. I mean, I don't even talk to people if they haven't done my course. I won't even talk to them.
I hear you.
It's a waste of time. It's a waste of time for them, and it's a waste of time for me. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
That's why I asked. But that makes perfect sense. Okay, man. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. Super appreciate you coming back for a second time. Your work's amazing. Thank you again. And anything else you want to say before we end off on this?
Only to you, I want to say thank you for having me. And if you want to talk about anything else, give me a shout. We'll do it again.
Love it, my friend.
Okay, buddy.
Thanks,
you.
Dave. Hold on one second.